I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
We now know, of course, those gentlemen were lying. A series of investigations and lawsuits later revealed that big tobacco knew full well cigarettes were not only addictive, but massively harmful to human health. And that was the scandal, not just that their product was dangerous, but that they knew it was dangerous and addictive and lied about it for decades. It's why the tobacco companies have had to pay billions of dollars in settlements, and why, in 2006, they were found guilty of civil fraud and racketeering for deceiving the public to maintain profits. Now, some bombshell new reporting suggests a possible parallel in the fossil fuel industry. Since the mid-90s, ExxonMobil has spent millions of dollars to spread denial and doubt about man-made climate change. In 1997, then Chairman Lee Raymond campaigned fiercely against the Kyoto Protocol, telling a conference in Beijing the case for so-called global warming is far from airtight. There's a lot we really don't know about how climate will change in the 21st century and beyond. But recent reports by the LA Times and the Pulitzer Prize-winning Inside Climate News document how Exxon's own scientists were researching and drawing conclusions about climate change as far back as 1977. One of them reportedly informed the company's management committee, quote, "There is general scientific agreement that the most likely manner in which mankind is influencing the global climate is through carbon dioxide released from the burning of fossil fuels." Then, towards the end of the 1980s, Inside Climate News reports Exxon curtailed its carbon dioxide research. But even after that, in the early 90s, researchers and engineers at Exxon and a subsidiary were still incorporating climate projection models into their planning for Arctic operations, according to the LA Times. In response, two California congressmen have now written a letter to Attorney General Loretta Lynch asking her to open the same kind of investigation into ExxonMobil the government pursued against big tobacco. Joining me now, Neela Banerjee. She's a senior reporter for Inside Climate News. And Neela, how much do we know about what Exxon knew and when inside their company about what essentially their product was doing to the atmosphere?
I think at this point we know quite a lot. Exxon, one of their senior scientists told their management committee, which is the top executives of the corporation, in 1977 in a very neutral report about the emerging science of climate change. And from then on, Exxon not only tracked the science, but they did their own in-house research that was on par with anything that academics or the government were doing. And in fact, academia and the government welcomed Exxon's research. And the reason Exxon was doing this was because they knew that if the science was true, that at some point there would be limits on greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels. And they thought at that time, in the late 70s and 80s, that the best way to address those possible limits or constraints would be to do really good science so they could have a seat at the table and a legitimate voice in the process.
So that's fascinating. So their scientists way back 38 years ago are saying, look, the stuff that we pull out of the ground, when it gets burned, releases carbon dioxide. That is heating the earth. We got, scientists are coming to some agreement on this, and they're thinking, okay, well, we're a company that's made of scientists, right? I mean, a place like Exxon, petrochemical companies and fossil fuel companies depend on scientists for everything they do. We need to sort of know this science so that when inevitably they come to regulate us, we can have a negotiation about that. But then they also started doing something else, right? Which was essentially funding folks to confuse people about the science itself.
Well, there was some overlap in that, but basically, so the period that Inside Climate News looked at was from about 1977 to 1986, and at that time, they weren't involved in any denial activities. I mean, they actually talked about uncertainty, but they talked about uncertainty in the way that other scientists in academia and government did. Their questions were not beyond the pale, and so what we have gathered is that at around 1989, that marks when there was a shift in the internal thinking and the thinking at the executive level about what to do on climate change. And that was when Exxon joined this group called the Global Climate Coalition, which sounds very green. But in fact, they were put together to fight any policy reaction to climate change.
So instead of, I mean, at a certain point, they decided, oh, rather than just accept this as a fait accompli, this thing's going to get regulated and figure out how we can manage it, maybe we can just confuse people or be part of a large effort to muddy the waters enough that we can just keep doing what we're doing.
You know, I mean, our research hasn't gone that far, and I think other people have done that research about what they were involved in, but there was some kind of decision made that the approach to have a seat at the table by doing cutting-edge research was just not the way to go for them. And they decided that it was not enough just to be neutral and to keep producing fossil fuels, but that actually they needed to be a very loud and articulate voice about the uncertainty and about and use the uncertainty as a wedge,
Right.
to kind of confuse the issue. Yes.
Neela Banerjee, Inside Climate News. Thank you very much.